Welcome back, Steeler fans, and believe it or not, it's after a victory. I don't know how many people saw I think it was a 9.5 point underdog at the start of the game on Sunday versus Tampa Bay. But not only did Pittsburgh cover, they won. So no one on this podcast had that happening. I can tell you that. We all had Tampa Bay with the points. So nice to come back to the group here with a W. So as always, I'm joined by Corey Karbowski here. I mean, Corey, we were all pretty bleak entering this past Sunday's game, but we found a way to come out with a W. I don't know what Mike Tomlin did or this week or whatever, but shoot, we had guys playing like their hair was on fire on defense for a change. It looked like there was some energy on that front. They were getting after Tom Brady. Offense moved the ball, even with a Mitchell Trubisky touchdown to save the day. So, Corey, tell me what you thought about this past game and what stood out to you.
I think the biggest positive that stood out to me was that, a lot of us are down on Tomlin. I think we've been treated pretty well for the past 40 or 50 years. I'm not sure why I'm saying we. I've been around for only 20 of those, but I think it shows that he still has his coaching medal. We had two guys coming off the street, and Elijah Riley and Josh Jackson from a week before. But these guys didn't have jobs. Like, they weren't on practice squads. They were off these street signings. And so I think this showed that, we all know Tomlin has a big impact on the defense, that he still has it. He can still inspire. Like, this is a team that can still beat good teams with them. And after these first few weeks, there were, I think, some reasonable question marks around that. I think I'm also a little not down on this game, but I'm not sure it really was what we needed, like a Mitchell Trubisky game-winning drive, because we all know Mitch isn't going to be the franchise QB. It would have been nice to either see Kenny, if he didn't have not a concussion, but the head injury, he'll be back, but it'd be nice if we could see him at least try and close the deal. Or, we're going to be a bad team still. Let's not get it twisted. That loss might have helped us in the draft race towards the end of the year.
Corey,
so those are kind of my thoughts.
Corey, always with a dose of reality there. Steelers fans, don't get too high on this team because we're still not good. And it's not that I disagree with you in a sense. Like I said, Will, we all thought we were heading into a slaughter fest, and I think Vegas had it played that way, especially with all the injuries we had on defense. Honestly, Tampa Bay that's one of the worst games I've ever seen Tampa Bay and Tom Brady play together. He missed Godwin on simple, just like check down stick throws. Josh Jackson shut down Mike Evans. Mike Evans was invisible that game. And that's one guy who I thought might really, take advantage of jump balls, and guys not being used to that. Like you said, maybe getting a jump ball over Elijah Riley or something to that effect. Shoot, another guy off the street forced to play. But those guys played pretty well. Josh Jackson, pretty much took Mike Evans out of the game. So and just nice to see a victory for a change. It just felt like we weren't going to see one of those for a while with just how the schedule was looking and how bad we were playing. But like you said, give Mike Tomlin some credit. It's actually very typical of a Mike Tomlin-led Steelers team. We tend to play up against the good teams, down against the bad teams. How many times have we, played with a bad Raiders team and the Raiders come out with a victory or something? But then last year, no one's given us any chance opening weekend against the Bills. And then all of a sudden, hey, Steelers get a week 1 win against, AFC heavyweight favorite. So just nice to see a W for a change. Definitely a lot we can still work on. The ground game was still non-existent. That's still a major issue going forward. There's just no room to run. Again, offensive line did a nice job in pass protection. I'll give them that. Whether it was Kenny or even Mitchell Trubisky towards the end, they had time to stand in there and make plays. But I'll tell you right now, the guy who might have had the best game of his career well, maybe not best game, because he did have a 4 touchdown game just a year or two ago, but Chase Claypool welcome to the big show, man. Like, seriously, welcome to the big show, because we've been kind of waiting for, these good contested catches all year long. And he just had multiple ones where it's like clutch, big time, sideline, reeling in tough catches. And it was just like, man, this is, why I had a lot of optimism for our wide receiver group, him,
Mhm.
Pickens, Deontay Johnson. As those three go, I mean, that's a pretty good starting combo, but we just hadn't seen them all put it out there all at the same time. So it was nice to see Claypool step up on a day where Deontay didn't catch a ton of balls. I think George only caught like 4.
Yeah.
We didn't go to the tight ends at all, essentially at all. Outside of a busted play, a nice first catch, Connor Hayward, your first big one of your career. You caught a defense that wasn't totally off the field for a nice 45-yard gain, but so still a lot of areas to work on.
Mhm.
But it was just nice to see Mitchell come in and actually put some good plays. Because I don't know about you, Corey, but when I saw him going out there, I thought, well, shit, here goes all the offensive energy. Here goes all the maybe creative play calls we have with Kenny in there. I expected kind of a meager, kind of reserved, meek, type of performance from Mitchell Trubisky, but he proved us all wrong there. I mean, what you got to commend him for a good game there, Corey. I mean, well, what did you see that made what Mitchell did so effective on Sunday? It seemed like we'd been wanting to see this through
Yes.
like the first 3 weeks, but it was like, where did this come from, and what made him look so good this Sunday?
So I think I have two things. One, I mean, he really settled into the pocket, which I'm not sure why he couldn't do that when he was starting. You saw it in the sack when he first got in, where he looked like same frantic, kind of looked at a receiver, turned it down, and then took the sack. But I think a big thing was it seemed like Canada started to call a different game than he did for Kenny. So we saw it over the last 2 weeks where it wasn't, I mean, I'm not, the offense wasn't good by any means, but there was a little bit of aggression with letting Kenny throw the ball around. And it felt like at the beginning of this game, he was a lot more reserved, and it didn't look like it was the same offense as even what it was before. It looked very muted and very quiet, like what we were worried about for Kenny's first start. With Mitch, it felt like we started attacking the middle of the field, some dagger concepts. I mean, I was complaining about that talking to Will, like dagger concepts, Portland concepts. Like we refused to attack the middle of the field. If you recall, Steven Sims popped that big return. It was coming right out of half, right? Which he's been great in the return game. It's a big difference from Gunner, which is crazy since Gunner was an all pro. But anyways, we came out and we're in the red zone. Matt Canada calls first read, it's a speed out, we hit it. All right. That first read speed out that's going to the sideline. Then we call a flood concept, all 3 guys going to the right side of the sideline. And just a throwaway, they covered it up well. Third down, we call a smash. That's out corner, 2 more concepts to the sideline. We get in the red zone, and where things really tighten down, the field gets smaller, and we call 3 straight plays going to the sideline, which usually in the red zone, that's when the middle of the field is where you've got to hit it more because those sidelines get cramped. But it was just, that was one thing that really grinded my gears when I watched that drive, because we came out with a field goal. We topped a huge return, and you only get out of there with 3 points. But I I think when Trubisky got in, that was when we actually started to call some things to the middle of the field. It felt like Canada got more aggressive. So I mean, I feel like it's props to Mitch too, because Mitch had to deliver. But that was one big difference I think I noticed, was just the plays that were being called.
Aggressive. That's a word I haven't heard in the Steelers offensive dictionary here late, but I'm on board with that. We said it, when Kenny got anointed the starter, let him go out there and rip it. And then when Mitchell started the season, we were all clamoring for, guys, just let him go out there and, or just to him in general, don't be afraid to make a throw. So it's nice to see, one, Kenny obviously did that for a little bit, but then for Trubisky to come cold off the bench and make some really, high level throws to guys to find a way to pull out a victory in this game was pretty nice. But then you hit my next point. Our special teams unit was very solid, and that can be a challenge when you're missing guys who start. You've got special teamers, guys who are, elevated to play special teams. You've got special teamers that are starting on defense. We actually had a fairly good day on special teams. I mean, Steven Sims did, you pointed out, great way to start out the second half there with a big kick return to give, Kenny Pickett a short field at that time. I mean, that was huge. I don't think we ended up, I think all we got was a field goal off of it. But I mean, that was a big deal considering I think Tampa Bay to end the first half kind of drove down and got another field goal off to make it a 10-9 ball game going into half. So it was just nice to see. Yeah, because I think at one point it was 13-9.
Yep.
So I think that's
Yep.
right. So but no, nice see a little bit of a spark there. I couldn't help but think though, when I saw Steven Sims running, boy, it sure would have been nice if that's Calvin Austin, because he probably would have been able to take it to the house.
And I was going to bring that up a little later. I just said it on the boards actually probably about 30 minutes ago. Guys like Calvin Austin, there was a Pitt receiver a while ago, Quadri Jones, I think. Well, when Canada was there, those are the one type of player that it feels like Matt Canada knows how to use. Like throughout all his tenures, he always knew how to use his small, speedy slots really well. So that could be a nice little jolt to the offense if Canada can get him involved, which he was questioning like a week ago. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I love those small type running back, wide receiver guys. I loved him as soon as I started, see Darren Sproles play in the NFL. It's like God, it's like I want one of those type of guys on all my teams. I can't remember. There's a guy who's played for like Carolina for multiple years in a row, but he was
Ted Ginn Jr.
Sorry,
Ted Ginn Jr.
No, it was like a running back wide receiver from like TCU or something. I can't remember his name, but he like stuck around the league for multiple years, and all he did was a return guy. But it was just like, it always seemed like he was making a lot of plays on special teams or whatever, but it's like I've always liked those types of guys. Now, it's come back to bite us a few times, aka Dwight Archer. Good freaking Lord. I mean, that was one of the worst draft picks of the Kevin Colbert era. I know there's an emphasis on speed that offseason, but good Lord, how about some football too? But so special teams was a nice surprise this week. We kind of just got the normal ho-hem most of the time. So it was nice to see special teams actually chip in a game where we needed, guys to step up and make plays, that they found a way to do it. Close win, 20-18. So not a fantastic victory, but all the same, it was a win nonetheless. So we'll take it. Only, believe it or not, we're only one game out of first place in the division, as hard as that seems to believe with how bad we've played at times this year, but it is what it is. But so we've got a interesting game this upcoming week. We go down to Miami on Monday Night Football, which is nice, which means I won't have to find a stream to watch Steeler games.
Is it Monday night or Sunday night?
Oh, I could have swore it was Monday. I might have had that
wrong. Oh
wrong.
no, I could be wrong too. Let me see.
I think you're right. I think
it is Sunday. Okay.
Yeah, it's Sunday night or whatever. It's like
when I think the Monday night game. I think it's another horrible game if memory serves me right.
Monday night, Chicago, New England.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another bet. We'll get to some NFL picks here shortly, but this game versus Miami, kind of a very intriguing ordeal. It's like Miami started off the year kind of hot. Everyone remembers that game where they, rallied back from like 21 down against Baltimore. Tua put up 6 touchdowns over 400 yards. Ever since that game, though, that their offensive production, it's been solid, but it hasn't been elite, like it was that game. And a lot of that is because, they haven't had a quarterback recently. Tua hasn't played in 2 weeks. The game that Teddy Bridgewater was supposed to play, he didn't because he got injured in like the first, I think the first 30 seconds of that ball.
Yeah.
So Skylar Thompson finished that game. I think that was the game against the Jets or whatever. And then this past week, I can't remember who Miami played, but that, it was supposed to be the Skylar Thompson show again. And then he got hurt. And I think Teddy Bridgewater had to come in and play a little bit. So I mean, it's pretty clear right now, if Miami's success is all tied to who's playing quarterback. So Tua is scheduled to play this week. He's 2 weeks removed from the concussion protocol. So, I mean, that's not a surprise at this point. But what one matchup I'll just dive into right now is I'm worried about the speed at receiver that Miami has. Everyone knows about Tyreek Hill, fastest wide receiver in the NFL. Cheetah, see ya. But Jalen Waddle can make his presence felt on the football field too. So I worry a little bit about our corners keeping up with them. So that could just, especially if Tua is back there at quarterback, that they've shown nice chemistry this year in games that they've played in. So I worry about our tackling versus those guys. We miss, they're gone. That could be 6 a lot of the times if that happens. So, and Tyreek Hill has been a guy that's killed us in the past.
Historically,
a
yeah.
lot of yards, not always touchdowns, but he's put up a lot of yards. So definitely think that's a matchup we have to be a little wary of. The nice thing is we are expecting a lot of our defensive backfield back. So Corey, how about a matchup from you? What's a area we need to look at this weekend?
Well, I'm going to focus on the offense, but I do want to say I think I have a little different point of view. I don't think we can truly rely on even if they played better this last week against the Bucs, I don't think we can truly rely on our receivers to stop or our corners to stop those receivers. So I think the big thing is going to be getting guys to get pressure. So I think that's, Alex Highsmith against Teron Armstead, who's an elite left tackle. But really, Larry Ogunjobi, who had an outstanding game last week, actually, that we didn't mention. He was fantastic. Him and Cam Hayward against Liam Eichenberg, he has been very bad for the Dolphins. He's been horrible. Even worse than Gadecki for the Bucs. This could be an even bigger week for those two. However, the offensive points that I wanted to focus on is Chase Claypool and Pat Freiermuth. And there's a question mark next to Pat's name because we don't really know if he's playing. But those two against Jerome Baker and I think it's Elandon
Roberts.
Elandon Roberts, yes. Those two have not been very impactful this year. Elandon Roberts is a good run stopper, not very much there in the pass game. And Jerome Baker's been kind of just out there. He's been like a ghost. So those two over the middle of the field, which is asking a lot out of our offense, apparently. But if those two can get routes to the middle and get the balls to them, I think that could be a big exploit for the Steelers.
Yeah, you mentioned the guy Alex Highsmith. Believe it or not, he's back on the top at the leaderboard position. He does now lead the league in sacks yet again, which again, Corey, we've talked about this a few times. It just seems like he's kind of an opportunistic defender at sometimes. Stats don't always tell the story because you look at his stats, he's leading the league in sacks for, but man, it just seems like there's a lot of times where he's not as big as a factor as we'd hope he'd be. But then there's plays where he makes great plays. You mentioned a strip sack. This past week versus Tampa Bay was just wow. That's exactly what we needed at the right time or whatever. So he kind of shows up big sometimes when we don't expect him to. So it'd just be really nice if we had TJ back, but that's asking too much for this year, in my opinion. I think he'll be out for the rest of the year. But I actually think our wide receivers have good matchups versus their cornerbacks. Outside of Xavier Howard, their cornerbacks really aren't all that special. Nick Needham's a guy I know that Will really liked. We both liked him in the pre-draft process because he's a feisty corner. But he gets grabby too or whatever. So, I mean, there are times where I think, whether it's Pickens, Claypool, Johnson, I think, I think Howard's going to follow around Johnson most of the day. But, I mean, I think this is a game where Pickens and Claypool, they could really post big days, especially Pickens because he's so much bigger than most cornerbacks or whatever. And I can't even remember the name of the other two corners.
The Auburn
One's
guy,
Noah,
right?
Noah,
yes.
Or whatever from Auburn, but he's been, a pretty big disappointment. I mean, he was a first round pick and he doesn't really play a whole lot if they don't have
very Artie Burns-ish. That's a very similar.
Oh God, man, it's still too soon
situation.
to bring up Artie Burns, man. I mean, that talk about a guy who never flourished, like we hoped he would be. I mean, that just goes to show you how bad the Steelers are at drafting defensive backs, especially in round one. But
We can sign him off the street apparently. So
yeah,
I
I mean
can't
that
and
that's
trade
that's
for him, Witherspoon.
yeah, that is the one area, where it does seem like we've been able to do some things as far as free agency goes. It does always seem like we bring in some corners. I think it's because we know we have to, because every time we take a chance on one, they don't normally pan out.
I hope.
At least not to the degree that we want them to anyway. So, um, but yeah, man, this is driving me crazy. I can't remember the name of this other corner. I'm gonna look it up here real quick. Kadir
See.
Kuhu is.
Oh.
I was just like, who the hell is that? So I mean that just
Yeah.
goes to show. I think our pass catchers need to have big games this week, because if they don't, that one, I just think that just means the offense isn't doing enough. Just because I think we have a good matchup there across the board, really. And I know Howard's very good, but he's been dealing with a little bit of a hamstring issue this year too. So he's gotten beat on some routes this year. I think I was watching I think it was the Miami Bengals game, and I think it was T Higgins that practically ran right past him. So I
Yes.
think we can attack their corners. I do think so. So what about another matchup for me, Corey?
So this is a matchup that's pretty funny because I'd be much more concerned about these two matchups if they were flipped. But Dan Moore versus Jalen Phillips is going to be a big one. Jalen Phillips, their overall pass rushing hasn't been very good, but Jalen Phillips has been the best of the group. But I'll tell you what, if they flipped it, because Melvin Ingram pretty much always plays on the left side of their D line, and
Mhm.
Jalen Phillips pretty much always plays on the right. If they flip those two, I'd be extremely concerned about this game because we all saw the reports from last season about how Dan Moore would just get beat like a drum by Melvin Ingram. I mean,
Right.
he had no part of him. And then Jalen Phillips is the exact type of edge rusher that Chucks just cannot play against, those real strong bull rush guys that just get into his chest. But since they are flipped, and I doubt that the Dolphins will flip it, I actually like the Dan Moore versus Jalen Phillips matchup. Dan Moore's pretty good at anchoring down. He usually gets beat by those speed rush, dip and rip guys. So Jalen Phillips is actually a pretty good matchup for him. And then I like Chucks against Melvin Ingram because that's a guy that those finesse spin rushers, those guys who just kind of try and speed their way, Chucks does well with. So if they roll out their drive one and they have a flip, I might start holding my breath a little. But as long as they keep up with their status quo, I think we've got some good matchups there.
Yeah, no, I agree. That I think that's always just an area of concern for us. How's the offensive line looking? Because the matchup that I think is going to be troublesome for us this week, just like I think it could be or was last week, was our interior offensive line against going up against Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis. I mean, those guys are just big, massive, powerful guys, and we've had trouble with those type of defensive linemen because we want to run the ball right up the damn middle so much in the Matt Canada offense. It just seems like we can never get any push there. And when guys like Christian Wilkins, who runs 6'4", 320, and then you got Raekwon Davis, who's like 6'7", 320. It's like those guys create really tough problems, especially because those guys can get their hands up too. And that they don't always get the sacks, but they actually get a lot of deflections at the line of scrimmage. So that's one thing. Whether it's Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky, they got to watch those throws over the middle because those guys like to get their hands up because they know they're not getting to the quarterback very often. So it's and then Mason Cole's been dealing with this weird ankle injury too. So I'm
Yeah.
always it's if all of a sudden it's Kendrick Green out there or JC Hassenauer, could be a long day against a
I
pretty
like how
nice
our
defensive line.
positions to watch just nail every single offensive line position.
Well, I mean, it's been our glaring weakness, for better part 2.5 years now. We've lost, all that first round talent that was on the line, Pouncey retiring, DeCastro retiring, even Alejandro Villanueva, I mean, he wasn't a high round draft pick, but he played, well for a few
2 Pro
stretch
Bowls,
years there.
3 Pro
Yeah.
Bowls, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it is what it is.
I mean, there was a time 2 years ago when Chucks was far and away the worst lineman on the line, and not that much has changed in his level of playing. He's been one of the top 2 better ones. So
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think you could go ask every Steeler fan, who the best 2 offensive linemen are of the group, and I think you're going to get a different answer 80% of the time. It is what it is, though. We know that's going to just be an area all year long where we could struggle. So, but with that being said, there are some other games this week I wanted to highlight in our pick segment here. I found the lines very interesting this week from Vegas. All but 2 home teams are favored to win this week, and even the 2 away teams that are favored look to be pretty obvious matchups. Like, so Green Bay heading to Washington without Carson Wentz, with Taylor Heineke going to make the start. It's like Green Bay's favored by like 5.5. I mean, so I think they're an obvious favorite there. And then a game we'll get into here and actually dissect a little bit more. Screw it. We'll start off with it. Could be kind of a game of the week here. Kansas City heads to San Francisco. Kansas City is favored by 3. Or no, sorry. I think I said that wrong. Kansas City is favored by 3 headed to San Francisco. A little bit of a, kind of odd game for San Fran last week. Atlanta just kind of, dominated in the second half. And I just didn't see that coming. I lost a bet because of that. Thank you very much. So it is what it is. But I mean, Corey, I'll let you go first on this one. I mean, how do you think this game's going to go?
This is a home game. So this game's at Kansas City, or?
No, sorry. Kansas City is traveling to San Fran. Kansas City is favored by 3. I butchered that.
Okay, so that was the other away game that they were favored. Okay. Both teams are coming off losses, and whenever good teams, which I'm not 100% convinced San Fran's a good team yet, but whenever good teams come off losses, they usually have come back with something to play for. I think the Chiefs are just a better team, but going to San Fran, they have some passionate fans. I think they have a nice home field advantage. So I think the Chiefs narrowly cover. I think it's 4 or 5 points, but I think it's going to be a better game than people anticipate after Atlanta did whatever they wanted on offense to them with Olademus Zacchaeus and Marcus Mariota running the helm. So I think the Chiefs win, not by a ton, but I think they do cover.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Kansas City's just a better overall team. It's funny, if you could take the Kansas City offense and pair it with the San Fran defense, I think you'd have a team that win, 19 games or 20 games and, go undefeated, win a Super Bowl, whatever. But it just perplexed me how Atlanta was basically able to do whatever they wanted to with on offense to their defense there. So,
you know what I want to say? I think you won't find a more premier matchup all year with Fred Warner matching up with Travis Kelce. Now that I think about it, that's going to be an elite matchup.